The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF.
Hi, I'm Amber Bell, and this is Real Agriculture. I am here today with James Tansey, who is a provincial entomologist with the Ministry of Agriculture in Saskatchewan, and we are going to talk about grasshoppers. So welcome, James. It's really good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we're talking about grasshoppers, and it's wet and chilly. And the spring has kind of been all over the place with weather. So what are the risks that we're looking at this year?
Yeah, I think we need to take this in context of what we were looking at a few months ago. So we were looking at the seasonal forecast, and things were looking like they were going to be elevated temperatures, or above normal temperatures. So there was a high probability of that. Obviously, that didn't pan out. So temperatures are cool, the conditions are wet. These animals are ectotherms. So everything about them, their development, their behavior, their physiology is all determined by temperature, and they like it warm, and they like it dry. And part of the reason that they like it dry is that they are subject to the regulating effects of some fungal pathogens, and these can have really pretty serious effects on local populations at any rate. What this means in the current moment is that the hatch has been delayed. So the development of those embryos began again in the spring after terminating in the fall with the cold weather. Of course, the warm weather that stimulates the continued growth and development of those embryos. You need a certain number of growing degree days for them to absorb enough heat to complete their development. We're just arriving there right now. So we are seeing some emergence, and we are seeing some emergence of even damaging populations of nymphs, despite the cool, wet weather. So, judging by the oviposition index that was developed by Ag Canada, we are looking at a lot of eggs that went into the soil last year, and the possibility of some pretty serious hatches this spring. This cool, wet weather will continue to delay them, can slow down their activity, and of course, once those nymphs come up, they can become become exposed to those fungal infections.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with this video especially, we're talking about pulses. Now, because it's been cool and wet, can producers just sort of forget about grasshoppers? Should they still be monitoring? What recommendations would you make?
I would recommend to continue monitoring. Of course, the seedlings can be very sensitive to grasshopper feeding, even from relatively moderate numbers of nymphs, and they need to take that into consideration. So we don't really have hard thresholds for nymphs in seedlings, and I think growers need to take that as a case by case. And if they see damage accumulating, and it can accumulate quickly, then they need to act. Lentil, of course, is particularly sensitive to grasshopper feeding when it's in flower and early pod. Two-straight grasshopper really likes to munch on lentil, so they can cause a lot of damage in an awful hurry, and economic damage at low numbers. So our threshold for those is 2 adults per plant, or per square meter, pardon me.
That's not a lot of adults there.
No, it's not. No, it's pretty low density, but they can cause a lot of damage in small numbers.
So if you start to notice them in your field, what would be your next steps?
To monitor, evaluate them against the thresholds for a particular crop. Typically, with most crops, we're looking in the range of 10 to 12. If growing conditions are very good, you can tolerate 10 to 15 really.
Oh, wow.
With different crops, flax and boll, lentil and flour, you're looking at 2 per square meter. And you need to walk the crop to be able to determine what you have there. The easiest way is to walk a transect through your crop. So that is basically put your foot down, count what moves in a 1 meter by 1 meter area. Repeat that 10 times. Walk another 50 meters, 25 meters, repeat that again. So you get a total of 50 counts. Divide that whole number by 50, and that'll give you your per square meter count. And a decent evaluation of what's going on in your whole field.
Okay, and if you have reached those thresholds, then it's time to spray?
That's your action threshold, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
And you probably have to do that fairly quickly to...
Yeah, damage can accumulate quickly. So yeah, it behooves a grower to get on that.
To get on it right away.
Yeah.
That's good to know. It's funny, no matter how many of these videos we do, it's all about scouting and being out in your field.
Yeah, it's a consistent theme.
You don't just get to go to Mexico.
Truly, yeah.
Okay, so are there certain stages in the pulse growth cycle that are more susceptible to grasshopper damage?
Of course, yeah, and as we mentioned before, seedling crops are particularly sensitive. Damage to cotyledons, of course, can really be detrimental to the growth of plants. So that can coordinate well with the emergence of nymph grasshoppers, or grasshopper nymphs. So yeah, evaluate those on a case by case again. Other stages of crop growth that are particularly sensitive, and we talked a little bit about lentils before, but when they're in that flowering stage or early flower or early pod stage, they're particularly sensitive to grasshopper feeding, and you need to have a low threshold for them, and that's once again 2 per square meter. An important consideration too is that we've got 4 primary pest species in the province. We have about 85 species of grasshopper in the province. The vast majority of these are never pests.
Oh,
so
cool.
we have a relatively good diversity of grasshoppers. You mentioned before the speckled rangeland grasshopper that you've been seeing with the red wings in the spring, not a pest. So yeah, if it has colored wings, or if it's a noisy flyer, or a chirper, or a caller, or has long antennae, not a pest.
Then they just look pretty.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Bird food, yeah, or gopher food, as the case may be. So once again, we have 85 species of grasshopper in the province. The vast majority of these are not damaging. So we do have 4 kind of repeat offenders, as it were. So why this is important is they have different host preferences. So we have a couple that are considered ambivorous, so that is ambivalent about what they feed on. Migratory grasshopper and Packard's grasshopper are both considered to be ambivorous, although they still demonstrate preferences for different plants. But a good rule is that they will consume most crops. Then can be problematic in a number of different settings. Two-stripe grasshopper tends to prefer broadleaf plants, less of a cereal problem, although they can be damaging in cereal as well. So they don't do as well on grasses, but they can be problem in cereal crops. Cereal crops are a favorite of clearwing grasshopper, which is a relatively smaller grasshopper. A couple of the species that we talked about, two-stripe and Packards, those are some of those girls are pretty big, 1.5 inch plus, right? The females are larger than the males. In the case of migratory, that's about 1.2 inches, 1.1 inches. Clearwing, about 1 inch. So relatively smaller, about half the size of a two-stripe grasshopper as an adult, but they make up for it in appetite and numbers. But they really love cereals. Why that's important to pulse growers is, and I recommend the viewers take a look at our identification webinar on our ministry website. They're relatively easy to identify. Look for a camouflage pattern on the hind wing. They don't like pulses very much, and so you can see them in relatively high numbers in non-host settings where they're just basking. They're not actually feeding on that crop.
Okay.
So that will color your control decisions.
So it'd be one you don't have to worry about so much.
Yeah, if you have a pulse next to a cereal crop,
then you might have some problems.
Yeah, you want to address that, but yeah.
Okay. Well, that has been a ton of information. And is there somewhere that producers can contact you if they have any questions?
Yeah, I'm actually really easy to reach. If you just Google my name, it'll probably pop up. James Tansey, Ministry of Agriculture, James Tansey, entomologist. Something like that. It'll probably come up. So.
That's fantastic. Well, Thank you for joining us on Real Agriculture. And that was James Tansey on Real Agriculture.
Thank you.